Ask nearly any baseball fan about Frank Thomas, and they'll immediately start to talk about the big hurt of the 90s and the monster home runs that got him into the Hall of Fame. Ask any baseball card collector about Frank Thomas, and they'll tell you about his rookie card. No, not that one. That one. But there's another Frank Thomas in baseball history. Not as famous, but certainly more infamous. The 1965 Topps Frank Thomas card, number 123, is one of those common cards that collectors acquire for the sole purpose of completing a set. It is his lone card with the Phillies, and the lore surrounding why swirls just as violently now as it did back in '65. Thomas was a three-time All-Star with the Pirates, and a bit of a slugger for his era. The Pirates traded him to Cincinnati in 1959 in a 7-player deal that included former Phillies catcher Smokey Burgess and future Phillies third baseman Don Hoak. For the 1960 season, he was traded to the Cubs in a deal that included future Phillies player Lee Walls. For the '61 season, he was traded again to the Milwaukee Braves for future Phillies player Mel Roach. For '62, he was traded to the expansion Mets, where he played with the Phillies legend Richie Ashburn. The Mets later traded Thomas to the Phillies in August of 1964 for a pair of unproven rookies and cash. So, Frank Thomas arrived in Philadelphia just in time for the great collapse of '64, when the first place and heavily favored Phils completely imploded at the end of the season and ultimately lost the pennant. 1964 was also the rookie year of Dick Allen, whose path to the majors came through a bevy of racial animus. Only 7 years after the Phillies organization broke the color barrier, see Episode 1 for further context, and before the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which passed in July, Dick Allen took the field for the Phillies as a rookie. He, along with future Hall of Famer Fergie Jenkins, were the first black players for the Little Rock Travelers, the minor league affiliate for the Phils, and he faced quite a bit of discrimination and racism during his time in Arkansas. It didn't exactly stop when he got to Philly. Allen was the 1964 Rookie of the Year, leading the league in runs, triples, extra base hits, and total bases. He batted .318 with 29 home runs, including a couple of absolute moonshots that we'll get into in future episodes dedicated to the legend of Dick Allen. But back to the story. For the '65 season, Frank Thomas and Dick Allen were two of the 4 members of Murderers Row that also included sluggers Johnny Callison and Wes Covington. Thomas was known as a bully and targeted Allen with relentless teasing. There are conflicting accounts, but the height of the story goes something like this. In late June, when the Phils were leaving the West Coast to come back home to Philadelphia, Thomas called out to Allen, "Hey boy, can you carry my bags to the lobby?" A white man calling a black man boy was an insult for sure, akin to other racial slurs. This stuck with Allen, who never backed down from racial prejudice. During the July 2nd game that year, Thomas failed to get down a crucial bunt. During batting practice before the game the next day on July 3rd, someone shouted at Frank Thomas, teasing him about practicing bunts. Most accounts say it was Johnny Callison who said it, and Allen agrees. Thomas said it was Allen, who shot back at Allen something akin to, "Keep running your mouth like Cassius Clay and see what happens." It might have been Muhammad Clay, it might have been Malcolm X. Conflicting accounts again. The two started going at each other, and it came to blows, with Dick Allen throwing the first punch. Instead of returning blow for blow, Frank Thomas swung his bat at Dick Allen, hitting him square in the shoulder. And that was the unforgivable crime. He broke the unwritten rule that you never swing a bat at another player. Johnny Callison said as much later in life. Fights happen. Ask Nolan Ryan. But here, Frank Thomas was indefensible. Ruben Amaro broke up the scuffle and took a blow himself for the trouble. Racial prejudice followed the incident in the aftermath. Phillies manager Gene Mauch threatened his players with $1,000 fines, $2,000 for Allen, if any of them spoke to the press about the incident. Mauch wanted to keep things quiet. After the game that night, the Phillies placed Frank Thomas on irrevocable waivers and released him outright for his actions. With Thomas not part of the team any longer, he was free to speak to the papers, which he did. He spun a narrative that it was all Allen's fault, and Allen, under the threat of fine, couldn't respond. The fans took Thomas's explanation and saw a black man who cost a white man his job. Combine that with the racially charged civil rights era and the locally charged tensions in the aftermath of the 1964 Philadelphia race riot, and you get a fan base that turned on Allen immediately, taunting him relentlessly, throwing things at him on the field, and ultimately leading to the Phillies trading one of the best players of the era. Frank Thomas cost Philadelphia Dick Allen and derailed a legend in the making. Dick Allen died in December of 2020. Frank Thomas died in January of 2023. With both men passed, the totality of the story will lose bits and pieces. And slowly, the story becomes legend, and the legend becomes lore. This silly little baseball card and what it represents has a lot to say. So the next time you pass a box of old beat-up cards at a flea market or at a garage sale, pick them up and listen. Thanks for watching. Hit that like button if you did. Click on subscribe if you want more. And tell your friends where they can find more baseball card stories, legends, and lore.